Greetings, good people. Welcome to Who Knows, It's Just Life, the podcast. I'm your host, Kyle. Thank you for listening today. On today's episode, I'm joined by Maryland State Delegate Jazz Lewis. So Jazz and I go way back. We first met in college. We were both involved with Community Roots way back in the day. And then after college, we were in a band together called 10 Righteous Minds, we were together for maybe about a year or so. Currently, Jazz represents the 24th District in the state of Maryland, which is Central Prince George's County. He covers areas like Bowie, Fairwood, Glendale, Landover, Suitland, amongst others. He is the chair of the Democratic Caucus. He was originally appointed in January 2017 and was elected in 2018 and is serving currently. And we're actually on the eve of the next legislative session in Maryland, which starts in January. So, Jazz, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. It's good to be here. It's good to be among family and friends, man. It's been a while since we've caught up.
Yeah, no, for sure. I really appreciate you getting on the show and being able to catch up in this way. And what really made me want to reach out to Jazz is Jazz also just had a baby not too long ago, and I'm a father. I've talked about that briefly on the show so far. I'll get into that a lot more later, but just with Jazz's position as a state delegate, he's always been passionate about the community and helping out and just doing his part to serve others for one, but also just to make this world a better place. And I know that hits differently now as a father, so we'll definitely get into that a little bit. But before we get too much into it, I want to start by explaining the premise of the show. Some of you who've been listening understand this, but Jazz is new. So basically, this podcast is just who knows, it's just life. So I admit that I don't know and that I'm still learning and that I'm moving in this world based on my experiences and understandings to this point. But ultimately, I'm continuously learning, trying to figure out things as the world is coming to me and as I come to it. So this podcast is a public expression of that learning process, and any and all topics are fair game. So that's what makes this fun. We can talk about anything. And so it's basically, Jazz, I welcome you to this space. I welcome you to challenge me because I'm here for that learning. So check me along the way if I say something off the wall or whatever. And just welcome to that space. And usually I kick off the show with a quick check-in. So just how are you doing today, this week? What's going on? What's new for you in this moment? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling amidst of things. Like Kyle said, my wife and I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy 9 weeks ago today. He's healthy.
Oh, wow.
And doing well. Right now, my wife is putting him to sleep. We just bathed him a few minutes ago before I ran down here to hop on the podcast, which is an up. Just buried a really close uncle this past weekend. We're coming up on the anniversary of my father's passing, New Year's Eve. Man. So it's like a midst of highs and lows right now. But I'm all right. It's just like a tough year for everyone. And I think we're all learning to be gentle with one another, through this process.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about that. I didn't know about your uncle's passing and the anniversary of your father's passing. I'm sorry to hear that.
Thanks. But I'm learning. I mean, like you know. You learn the things that you're grateful for. Like my father passed away New Year's Eve. I buried him. My family buried him the day before the legislative session started last year, in January, and then the world shut down in March. So, though I'm still processing him not being here, this year has taught me to be thankful, and we were able to send him home the way he wanted to go home because it happened before the pandemic. And I appreciate that. You know what I mean? I will always remember that time and that process that I was able to fellowship with my siblings, with my families, with my close friends, where we could embrace one another instead of doing virtual and remote things that a lot of people have had to do this past year, in addition to all the other challenges people have had to face during a pandemic between job loss, health, potential evictions, company closures. I mean, it's been heavy. All around. I think it's just one of those times where you have to take stock and be thankful for what you got.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just crazy to put all that in perspective. And I mean, and you said that was last year, but that was January of this year, right? That was before this 2020 legislative session.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
and it's just crazy how I feel like everybody who thinks about like January, February, even early March, it's like, oh, last year. I mean, that was still technically this year, and it just feels like light years away, dependent compared to like what we've been dealing with since the March time frame. It's crazy. But yeah, no, that's I really appreciate that perspective, and yeah, I know a lot of people who've had people pass away, and just figuring out what to do, how to do that, and it's just a real struggle. Yeah, so dang. But yeah, I appreciate your perspective on that.
Yeah, no
Um,
doubt.
yeah, so I mean, let's get into it. I mean, like, so what's it like? What's life like as a delegate? And I mean, things have had to have changed, in terms of how you move, whether it's on social media or just in real life. I mean, just being a delegate. Do you feel like you have to be on 24/7, or the fact that, I guess maybe the fact that Maryland has this legislative session just from January to March to April, maybe that's not as bad for a state delegate here in Maryland as it would be for a congressional representative. But so, what is life like now?
I'll start a little bit about how our legislature is designed, as well as a little bit about me. Like Kyle said, I represent the 24th District, which is Central Prince George's County. I was born and raised in Prince George's County. Here, I like to say this county birthed me and molded me, and the things I fight for are based on that. I got into activism before politics for selfish reasons initially. To be honest, I was a student on University of Maryland's campus. I worked my way through school. Like Kyle knows, we played in a band together. I don't know that Kyle knew that I also used to play at local churches to help pay my way through school. And I used to work at the Quality Inn Hotel in College Park with our buddy Tony. That also helped pay my way. And a bunch of side jobs, right? And that was my entire 4-year time. Everyone didn't know that, but that was my lived experience. So when the recession happened, I was in my sophomore year, and I remember by my junior year, people had lost their homes, people had lost their jobs. So the state had lost a lot of revenue, and the way they were trying to bridge the gap of which they lost, they were thinking of removing some of the subsidies for public colleges and universities, which would have caused for tuition to go up. And for folks like me, that would have priced me out. So that's how I really got into activism, because me and a bunch of other friends were like, hell no, we won't go. You're not going to break the economy and then price us out, and we're busting our ass, which led me into organizing. And we raised, just a little bit of hell, which got my name in the paper.
Just the right amount of hell.
Just the right amount of hell for them to find the money that apparently they were going to not use for the whole tuition price is the same. And that led me to community organizing, which led me to realizing policy is how you change lives. I went back to school, got my policy degree, and after I graduated there, I got a job working for Congressman Steny Hoyer, which I still do outside of the legislature. So Maryland is a part-time legislature. It's truthfully full-time year-round, but historically, the legislature would meet when you couldn't farm or fish, which was during the winter. We would meet from the second Wednesday in January to the second Monday in April, just about the time that it's time for harvest and time to start fishing, whether you're getting crabs or other things from the bay. We've held that for 400 plus years, right? So our legislature still meets in that cycle. And majority of the members, not everyone, are part-time. They have jobs outside of that. So to answer your question, what's life as a state delegate? It's a hustle. I mean, like it is for most parents and most people, because, we have our job where we are trying to pursue policies to improve our community, but we have a day job outside and family and things to balance, which I think makes us relate more to everyday people, because, we have, matter of fact, I have colleagues who, as soon as the legislative session ended, went to the front lines to help address the COVID pandemic because they were doctors and nurses. I have a colleague who digs graves, on the Eastern Shore,
Yeah.
who makes less than minimum wage, so when they speak to these policies, it hits you different because, it's not academic. It's real. But I enjoy being a state delegate. I represent my home where I grew up. I'm working on policies right now to break up the concentration of liquor stores in low-income communities because we have a lot of data that shows that the concentration of these stores exacerbate health disparities and spurs on crime and other things. We found out that where we have these hyper density of liquor stores in Prince George's County, coincidentally are the places where we don't also have grocery stores in our food deserts. So
imagine that.
It just happened to be the case, right?
Right. Amazing.
So we have a bill that would allow the liquor stores to transfer to other places in the county that are rising. But we also are the bill would allow grocery stores that locate in food deserts. You can't sell, to those who may be listening to this and don't live in Maryland, grocery stores and convenience stores don't sell beer and wine here in Maryland like they do in other states, particularly in the South. Our bill would allow grocery stores, not convenience stores, grocery stores to sell beer and wine if they locate in a food desert so that they get that extra 20% of their revenue, which would be attractive to them. I've already passed bills on tax credits and things like that. This would be a added incentive for us to address this crisis of access to healthy food, which addresses the disparity of having healthy people, right? And also create competition for these liquor stores. And I brought that up as an example because that's something that is like you only pay attention to if you live in a community that doesn't have a grocery store and you have to drive 20 plus minutes or give someone a ride to, which matters to me because this is my home and I've seen it all my life. We are, this has been a tough year. There's a number of fights we had over this year over whether we should have a special session to address some of the challenges we're seeing in people potentially getting evicted, either from their rental unit or from their foreclosing on their homes. And it's tough. I have to remind folks, state government is not like federal government. They operate differently. I'll give you a prime example. When the federal government doesn't have to balance their books, right? This is why you have all these conversations about debt. Whenever they want to do something, they essentially put it on the credit card and get bondholders to, they issue credit as far as bonding, and then people invest in that because it's safe. States aren't allowed to do that, okay? Because we don't manage our own currency. We all are managed by the federal government, which means that when we run out of money, we run out of money.
Right.
And the only way
kind of
we can
like
get
home.
Yeah, kind of like home, right? The only way we can get more money is if we either cut stuff, cut programs, increase taxes, or get a transfer from the federal government on something, okay? So folks ended up on different spaces of that debate on whether we should have a special session. Some people felt it would be very hard for us to increase taxes in the middle of a pandemic when people are losing their jobs. Homeowners are stretched, asking for forbearance. You don't want to increase property taxes on people who may not have income coming in. But at the same time, we have core programs we need to take care of. So we ended up not doing a special session. That was the decision of our presiding officers because we were betting that our colleagues on Capitol Hill, particularly our Democratic colleagues, would get state and local money in the deal that would help us so we wouldn't have to make these tough choices of cutting core programs or increasing taxes, on those who are most hurt. So we have a lot ahead of us this upcoming session, but I think we're ready for the challenge.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate you breaking it down because I know Maryland is fairly unique in terms of its legislature, and also that difference between state and federal is an important, clarification to make. Because we, states, cities, they don't print money. The federal government definitely has a lot more leeway financially, but they still find a way to shut down the government every couple of years. But
exactly.
Anyway,
you got one job.
So you can't
one job. Right.
Right. Let's see how hard we can make this one job. But yes, I mean, you kind of got into it a little bit. So how was 2020 for you? It started off on a personal note, burying your father, which was tough in its own right. I can only imagine what that was like, and then to roll into a legislative session, and then during that session have shutting everything down with COVID and everything, and then of course later in the year we got so many examples of police brutality coming out us like a fire hose. What was 2020 like for you?
2020 was really busy, but it was 2020 was like a year of service, right? So we had to end our legislative session early because of the pandemic. We ended it 3.5 weeks earlier than we normally would. We still were able to pass the budget and do a lot of the core things we needed to. One, in case I got a bill passed to put together a work group to study police body cam storage. One of the reasons why a lot of jurisdictions don't have police officers using body-worn cameras is because the cost of purchasing the devices and storing the data of them. So we were studying different ways to find more cost-effective ways to purchase the devices and store the data, maybe at the state level, so that each of these police departments won't have to bear that cost. But then we can tie accountability and transparency measures on that, right? That was something we were able to get done. I spent a lot of March and April and May helping citizens get unemployment insurance, hosting town halls, for a lot of particularly sole proprietorships realize that they can file for unemployment insurance when normally they wouldn't be able to help them get by. And then, of course, in May, there was the murder of George Floyd. We had Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. So many that happened. That's not even to mention those that have happened here in Maryland, like William Green, who to those who aren't aware, was shot over a dozen times in a police cruiser. He had been arrested, his hands put behind his back, sat in the passenger seat, and then the officer, while in the car with him, shot him, I think about a dozen times, which was ridiculous. It's happening all over. We put together a work group in the House. The Senate had their own thing going on, putting together, studying what police accountability measures. I was supportive of that. Just for background knowledge for folks, a couple years ago, Johns Hopkins University pushed to get their own police force in the state, and they ended up getting it because they had enough political power to push it through. But me and a bunch of colleagues offered about a dozen amendments, such as they can't militarize their police with surplus equipment from Department of Defense, right? You can't be rolling.
Johns Hopkins SWAT team?
Yep. No Johns Hopkins SWAT. Not allowed to have that. They can't have tanks and military-grade drones and that type of stuff. This isn't Baghdad, right? It's not okay there. It's not okay here. They have to have body-worn cameras for all of their officers in the field. If the cameras are off and someone has an altercation with the police, that in and of itself is an incident to which the community could sue over. They have a civilian review board that the community chooses its leadership on there. And most civilian review boards, people don't realize that the police chief typically chooses who's on the civilian review board to hold police officers accountable, not the community. We made sure that wasn't the case. Because Johns Hopkins isn't an actual county or city, we put barriers over where they could police based on the streets, so that if they find themselves into a surrounding neighborhood and they get into something, they have no jurisdiction and they are liable. We put a whole bunch of transparency measures on them. That is a blueprint for the accountability measures we're about to take statewide now, which I'm very proud of, such as also like independent prosecution. We're bringing forward legislation on that. I'm a strong believer that in most professions, even me as an elected official, we don't self-police. We have a state prosecutor who looks into us. We're not looking into ourselves. I think we should have an independent special prosecutor who reviews police misconduct cases. And as I've talked to law enforcement of color in particular, Latino officers, black officers, LGBT officers, women officers, they would prefer independent special prosecutor because they feel like when you go to internal affairs, the information always gets out and they end up getting punished for speaking up. So it needs to be separate. We're bringing legislation on all of that. That has been critically important. The other thing that 2020 has shown me, it's just built a greater fire in addressing a lot of the inequalities that were already there. Of course, on police brutality, but also on healthcare, and how you're treated in prison. Maryland. Many people think of Maryland as a progressive-ish state or liberal-ish state. No, as a percentage of your population, no state incarcerates more black people than Maryland. 70% of our prison population is black, higher than Mississippi,
wow,
Alabama, Louisiana, all of them, which is just a shame.
Wow. I did not know that. That's crazy.
In Maryland, we have a phrase in Maryland called restrictive housing. They say that instead of if you were to go to the Secretary of Corrections and say, I want us to abolish solitary confinement. He would say, we don't do solitary confinement in Maryland. And you'd walk away very happy thinking like, oh, my state is so liberal. What we do is we place 2 people in a cell for 22 hours a day or more without being able to get out or see the light. Okay? That allows them to say that we don't do solitary confinement. We do what's called restrictive housing, which is the same thing based off of medical professionals. I've been pushing legislation to stop that, right? And particularly, if you're in solitary confinement or if you're locked up, you can't socially distance, So if people are safe to come home and you have the measures to bring them home, then do so instead of letting them die in prison, right? Racial wealth inequality. We've noticed that the people who have survived this pandemic the best are those who have the resources that they can go 6 months without working, right? Or they can relocate and work virtually from their beach home or their family home, wherever that is. If you can't do that, right? If you are living paycheck to paycheck, or let's say you're fortunate to have a 2-income family, and then one of the parents can't go to work, what happens to the entire family when all your expenses are based off the 2 of them? That's been a big challenge. So we're bringing together a Black agenda package focused on addressing some of those racial wealth inequality issues as well.
Yeah, that's what's up. That's good stuff. I did not know that Maryland incarcerates the most Black people of any state. I did not, as a proportion. I didn't realize that. I remember one of the things I was involved in back in Maryland when I was in student government was trying to, and this was just it was kind of a symbolic measure. It couldn't actually do anything tangible, but what we wanted to do was pass legislation that would say that the student body was against the COMAR regulations that require Maryland to purchase products from Maryland Correctional Enterprises, which as you know, but listeners might not know, is the state-run furniture salesman, and they sell other stuff too, but products that are built by prisoners, i.e. enslaved people, according to your 13th Amendment. So, that was something I was involved in, and I didn't effectively manage my time speaking at that SGA session. So I allowed questions to take on some of my time. Basically, I allowed naysayers to ruin my opportunity to make the case, and then it was voted down. So my political novice, my noviceness in terms of that situation, quelled that opportunity or that attempt. But that's been something that I've been passionate about for a long time, and I'm glad that you're addressing that in a few ways here in Maryland, in a very tangible, real way, in a very grown-up way, not just in SGA, but you're really at the table, and I really appreciate that, you're doing what you're doing.
I enjoy the work we get to do, man. I go to work every day, and I feel like this is my calling that God's called me to do, and I love it. Like anyone else, I don't particularly care for a lot of the politics per se. but it comes with it. And by politics, I mean, there's egos and personalities, and you got to learn to build relationships to kind of get through that and past that, so that what you're working for doesn't get stymied. When I first got in Annapolis, I was 27. I turned 28 like a month later, so I was the young guy on the block. Fortunately, there's plenty of folks younger than me there now, which is good. You know what I mean? Because I'm just 31. Awesome. So there's a diverse perspectives that are in the room, which I think makes better policy. But often, no matter how much data I had and how compelling I thought my arguments were, folks would look at me like, "Who's this 27-year-old dude, talking all this stuff?" And so I was like, "Fine." So I had to go to work, elected people who agreed with me, and now we're passing some bills. So let's get it done.
So a couple questions I have for you around that is I guess one is, do you find being a state delegate as like a kind of an ideal, I don't know if I should use the word ideal, but an ideal niche in terms of a political career, or does this make you, want to do some work here, but then also to look to other offices, whether that's at a federal level or, like governorship or anything like that? Does this inspire you to have your eyesights other places, or is this kind of like a nice little spot where you can really have impact and it's tangible enough, and it's also not too political? I imagine that things get even worse when you get to the federal level. So, what is this experience given you or what is this experience, done to your, political impressions of this country and your aspirations therein?
It's definitely inspired me, and I'll explain how. So, another thing in Annapolis, not only are we a part-time legislature, which I think helps us relate, but we also have very limited staff. I think a lot of people would assume, being elected official, you have, a staff of 5, 10, 15 people, helping you with policy. 20. Yeah. I got one person. I got one person, and my entire office budget is like less than $60,000 to pay my one person, do correspondent with constituents, everything, So one of the things it's made me think is just like, wow, if I can have this level of change with these limited resources, right? If I had a capacity where I could be focused on, systematic change full time with adequate staff, like how monumental could that be in the lives of like everyday people? That's where my mind goes. So I don't know what role that is. I do see you can have a lot of impact from deciding, look, I'm going to stay here in the legislature and do things, because, state legislatures are where state government are like our laboratories of democracy. It's where everything gets tried out before it goes nationwide. Think about the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare.
Romney Care.
It was Romney Care, right? In Massachusetts.
Let's call it what it is.
And Obama specifically went with that idea because it came from a conservative thinking that they would buy into it. And then they didn't do that so much. But that's typically how it works. So, I give you an example of something I'm working on at the state level right now that I'd love to take nationwide, and whether that's in Congress or me as a state delegate, just going state to state and reaching out to people, because you can do that too. Is this issue of racial wealth inequality, from housing to businesses, and we know that 41% of the businesses that have closed during the pandemic are black owned, despite the fact that only 3% of businesses in the country are black, right? So why is that? Well, because we don't get access to capital from the traditional banking sources. All right, so we need to expand access to capital to minority communities, to rural communities that have similar rates. And the traditional banking sector doesn't have an interest in doing that, because they have the same underwriting costs if they're doing a $5 million loan or a $5,000 loan, right? So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to focus all their attention on the $5 million loan. instead
That's
of
a big one. Yep.
instead of the smaller guys. And I think government could step in here in a major way. Maryland, for example, is sitting on about $60 billion in assets in our pension funds for the public. And we have to invest this in something to generate a return for our retirees, right? Instead of us investing this in Apple or Amazon, right? These big corporate, conglomerates, behemoths that are very monopolistic and shut out other people. Why don't we use a portion of that money? First off, why don't we have a portion of that money managed by diverse fund managers who understand where the limited spaces of capital are, and then make sure a percentage of that money are going into these communities that otherwise wouldn't get it. I think that could be life-changing. I'm working on something right now that would get us using all of the different pensions and retirement funds in Maryland to just have some policy at some small level that would encourage directly investing into these communities. Because unlike the banks and unlike venture capital, retirement funds and pension funds, they're not looking for the next Facebook, WhatsApp. They're not looking for something that's going to go $1 billion. They're looking for something that's going to provide a dedicated, consistent return so their retirees can get their money every month on time. You know what I mean? So
right.
So that
exactly.
when the barbershop, might not look appealing to Bank of America, it might look appealing to a couple of these pension funds because everyone got to get their hair cut every 2 weeks. I know I got to go, So,
right.
But that's something I'd love, and I'm talking to some folks in some other states of taking this idea of making sure we have diverse fund managers and that we invest our money diversely as well. I just think that if 2020 has showed us anything, this pandemic has shown us anything, is that when America coughs, we've heard it a million times, right? Specifically the black community, minority communities, sneeze, catch a flu, die, and we need not wait until a pandemic every time to fix stuff. So let's just get it done and build the political will right now to write some of these stuff that we fully have the capacity to deal with.
One other question about just dealing with the legislature and the state government. What is it like working with, I know we're a fairly blue state here in Maryland, but what is it like working with the Republicans here in this state, and how has, how has it been working with them? B, how from your vantage point, how have they taken the Trump presidency and this election cycle, if you had any insight onto that?
It's been very interesting. So I'll say first, I actually enjoy working with Republicans. I kind of feel like you don't truly believe something if you can't allow someone else's idea to compete up against yours. If you can't stand your ground, intellectually with someone else to show you really believe what you believe, then you're essentially you've become partisan, in my view. You know what I mean? You don't believe this because you just think this is good policy. It's partisan positioning that's convenient for you, right? So I enjoy talking to them because we often find that our ideas aren't always in conflict. Sometimes they are, but other times they're not. I'm actually, one of my primary bills I'm working on right now in the Senate, there's a Republican who's the sponsor of it. I'm the House sponsor as a Democrat, a young black brother from Prince George's County. He's a older white, Republican from rural Baltimore County. But we've come to the same place on this issue as it relates to prison reform for juvenile lifers. We don't think that, people who are sentenced, first off, our conservative Supreme Court has ruled that giving juveniles life without the possibility of parole is unconstitutional because their minds haven't developed to be able to fully comprehend their choices, even when they make terrible choices, right? They did that back in 2012. Right. They reaffirmed it again in 2013 and 2016. So we have a bill to ban giving juveniles life without the possibility of parole. It also would give any juvenile who's giving life without the possibility of parole or something like that, like 50 years, 60 years, whatever. After you serve 20 years, you have the opportunity to go before a judge and they review a number of factors to see if you're reformed. There's a ton of data by the National Institute of Justice that shows that, people's likelihood to reoffend after they pass 30 years old dropped to less than 5%. Right? So, why are we incarcerating you until you're 60 years old, 70 years old, when the likelihood of you doing anything wrong, a speeding ticket, is nil after you turn 32 years old? It just doesn't make sense. We're not being a good steward of the taxpayers' money, but morally it's also wrong. And we don't think about the opportunity cost of not having those folks who've made bad choices and served their time return to communities and inspire the next generation. That's missed out as well too. And he
fully,
agrees with
fully
me.
Investing that, and that's great that he agrees with you. But not only just letting them come back, but as fully realized American citizens with all of their rights, the ability to get a loan, the ability to do everything that they would as if they hadn't made that choice. Because if this is a correctional system and they come out, they should be corrected, and therefore they should be able to do anything anybody else does. And I think that age is interesting. The fact that data shows that 30, 32 is when the recidivism rate drops precipitously. You mentioned when your brain is fully developed for men, that's 26, 27 or something like that. So
correct.
That age is not a surprise to me because that's when things are starting to click. So yeah, wow.
And your peer group is changing, right? So when do most people commit crimes? The age they have when most people committing crimes is between 16 and 24, right? Because everyone is young and not fully developed. And after that, it trails off. Why? Because folks are starting to have families or getting to a career or realizing what they want out of life, and now they're just not doing other things. Okay. Just think about use Jay-Z as an example, when he was first rapping early on, he was talking about a lot of different things. Then when he started talking about, 30 is the new 20, you know what I mean?
Right.
Right. You change, right? So our laws and policies should reflect that. But to your point of working with Republicans, they can be intransient sometimes. There's things, I anticipate when we start this upcoming legislative session, there being a showdown of them not wanting to wear their masks, which is crazy. We've empowered our state police. None of us can enter the chambers without a mask. So I anticipate a couple of my Republican colleagues getting dragged out forcibly just because they want to make a statement. That type of stuff I think is silly. But I don't always think the conservative philosophy is at odds with, what I kind of consider my more pragmatic progressive philosophy. We just believe different things. They're not opposite of each other. If we end up in the same place.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think that's a healthy perspective to have because a lot of things have definitely gotten polarized, and that's one thing I know Obama said that he wishes he was able to. He wished one of the things he said he wished he could have done a better job of is healing that divide. I think a lot of that was, I don't think he could have controlled some of that.
Yep.
And I know with 45, I know that's just gotten worse. So. That's definitely tough. But your perspective is useful to think of it not as opposing sides, but as differing thought processes or different. Sometimes the goals might be similar, especially with prison reform and stuff like that. Maybe the approaches are different. Maybe the wants are different. Conservatives might want to save money, liberals might want to be a little bit more humane in terms of our treatment of human beings, or whatever that angle is, or whatever. But the actual result from a policy standpoint could be the same, and there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think.
Yep.
So, speaking of Obama, I know there was a little bit of he's been on his radio roadshow promoting his book, and I know there was that moment between him and I think Ilhan Omar, went against what he said in terms of slogans and defunding the police and all that. And I saw on Trevor Noah, he tried to kind of recouch what he said about slogans, and he made this. He kind of was trying to draw the analogy that James Baldwin was a brilliant, he was brilliantly able to describe the Black condition, and I think he said he just read The Fire Next Time, and he read it again this year, and he was like, it's still relevant today. But James Baldwin couldn't necessarily be a politician, because politicians can't talk like that, and they have to, not that they can't talk like that, but they have to represent a wide array of people, and they ultimately have to work with others that disagree and get policy done. And he kind of put those as things that can't be in the same boat. And I mean, knowing you, I know how your mind works. I know how you're rooted in activism. You're about the people. And I mean, to me, that's what makes a good representative. But Obama's answer kind of, and that his answer kind of digressed a little bit from the slogan thing. But I mean, I'm just curious what your perspective is on his little tiff with Omar and really the Black Lives Matter concept and some of the slogans that have been happening recently about that topic.
See, I think there's a lot of things going on. For one, within the broader Democratic Party, there's a lot of generational change going on. So just based off of that alone, stylistically, there's going to be friction on how people go about things. I just think about a couple, decades ago, for example, burning the flag was what a lot of folks did in the Vietnam era. It's you can't do that, right? But when police would come to break up their rallies and stuff, they would thank the police for their service. You know what I mean? So that was a thing you didn't touch. So a lot of those folks who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s now, they hear stuff like defund the police, like how can you say that, and whatnot. But they take it out of the context of we're talking about a tradition of activism and speaking truth to power that has gone on from generations since the beginning of this country, right? Originally, what people talking about, honestly, America's position to Great Britain being that effectively of slaves, and then being people in the nation being like, well, you treat folks in your nation of slaves, so how about we have a real conversation of freedom, and going on from there. So there's always going to be some differences. Me personally, I don't use the phrase defund the police for not because I don't have an idea as to what it means to me, but because it means different things to different people. And I think as an elected official, you have to speak to a broad audience, but to do so, you have to use shared, understood language. And I don't think defund the police is widely understood by the public the way a lot of the activists and other elected officials who use it want them to right now, is my point. So I've among my colleagues, I've done a number of little group sessions where we'll talk and be like, well, when you say defund the police, what do you think? And some of them who are kind of anti will say, yeah, they're trying to abolish the police. I'm like, yeah, but they didn't say that. If they wanted to abolish the police, they would have said abolish the police. They said defund the police. They're like, yeah, but what about our high crime communities and et cetera? I'm like, yeah, but have you ever looked at the data on what police spend the majority of their time on? They spend the majority of their time on responding to traffic calls, domestic events, things of that nature, not crime as you think about it, right? Violent criminals, theft, things of that nature. So when you start to get there, you can be like, oh, so essentially you're having a conversation about investing in mental health, investing in community, letting police officers not have to do things that they shouldn't have to do, right? Getting other people to do those things so that they can scale up doing the things that they should be doing, but also, training them and putting other voices in the room and other accountability measures in the room to make a 21st century police force that is more community-based than, let's say, just focus on property rights of people who are in power, okay? That is a long-winded thing to say, right? Explaining. Right. So, I don't really fault Obama. I also don't fault the people who are giving him smack for saying that you shouldn't say defund the police, because neither of them are wrong, but it's just not widely understood phrase. So I think until people decide to educate themselves, I was just think a few years ago when you would talk about just generally, like right now, police accountability is widely understood as something we need to do based off of body cam footage. I mean, just when, a few years ago with Mike Brown and other folks, the majority of the nation was not for police accountability just when Mike Brown was murdered a few years back. But just this overwhelming amount of data we've gotten since we've kind of pushed up body-worn cameras. And, and for those who's listening, I'm not saying that body-worn cameras is an end-all silver bullet for stuff. You know what I mean? In most cases, body-worn camera footage exonerates officers. But what it has done is that it has given proof to the public to help us tell our narrative. So now, when we say police accountability, it's widely understood that police violate the humanity of black people all the time, and it needs to stop, right? I don't think defund the police has reached that level yet as a phrase, the way police accountability has.
Yeah, I mean, even Black Lives Matter 6 years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, had a fraction, literally fractions of the approval that it has now, and body-worn cameras is part of that. But even just public perceptions and awareness of things has brought it to that point. So I guess it's interesting to think of how slogans are important, and maybe it just takes time for them to really matriculate into the understanding of their complexity, the complexity behind the slogan, and how that. And maybe it takes time for that to develop. I mean, one thing, though, that I think is interesting to compare this to is that the Republican Party is freaking genius with slogans, and it doesn't take time for them to catch on. I mean, everybody calls the Affordable Care Act Obamacare, and that is utterly offensive to me. The fact that Democrats have allowed this to be the name for the Affordable Care Act, which is Romney Care.
Yep.
Like, that's offensive to me. Like, why is the Democratic Party so terrible at coming up with slogans that catch on and tangibly mold the psyche of America? Whereas, I mean, the Republican Party has done it time and time again for the last literally 40 years.
Yeah, I think, one of the challenges, they have a smaller in-group to manage than we do, right? So, like, one of the things that I think that get in the way for Democrats is that we're always trying to pontificate in a way that this big tent allows everyone to feel like they were touched, whereas they're not worried about that. They speak to a very specific base. They speak to predominantly, their policies doesn't follow this, but their language speaks to middle-aged, disgruntled white males predominantly. That's all they care about. Now their policies speak almost exclusively to wealthy people.
Right. It's amazing.
But that's what they do, right? When we do stuff like that, it isn't inclusive enough, and then we have within party fights. So for example, we had arguments when people first started saying Black Lives Matter. There's Democrats that were pushing for us to say all lives matter because, that way it's inclusive of women and Latinos and everything else. It's just like, low income whites. And just like, not only are you overthinking this, you're also dehumanizing a group that is saying specifically like, no, I'm not saying that your lives shouldn't matter. I'm saying that our lives should. It's not the same thing. Right? And
right.
That's the problem with the Democratic Party. Like we got to get past this, like if I speak my truth, it does not mean that I don't believe in your truth. you know?
Right.
But we have to give an essay whenever we speak to anything, or else, folks don't believe they're included. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but that's, that's why. I actually think we're getting a little bit better with that, particularly because of spaces like Twitter and other things where, like, while the politicians are doing their long soliloquies, the people are just speaking. You know what I mean? And it's catching fire, and then they catch later. Like defund the police was just like that. Like it didn't start with politicians saying it. No disrespect to Omar. Like I respect her, but she didn't start saying defund the police. You know what I mean? It was people in the streets started saying defund the police, and
that's real.
And they were speaking to the people who were in the streets with them, who knew what they meant, right? So it was actually like a within, it's almost like I'm trying to think of a colloquial that's within the black community that we all know, that it was like the nod. It's like the nod.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like anyone who's gone particularly to a PWI, or you're black and you work in a predominantly white space, and you see another particularly black person, but loosely speaking, person of color, and you see them, they may be on the other side of the room. You just do like a gent nod where you acknowledge each other's existence, right? And everyone else may not understand what's going on there, but you do. And it's
not even see it.
They might not even see it. And it's not to say that you don't acknowledge everyone else's existence, but because you are rare in this room, you're the one that's rare in this room, you appreciate having someone else who acknowledges yours. I think that's what the defund the police phrase is to those who are most convicted in the community, in the streets, about that. I don't personally use the phrase just because I have to speak to a wide audience that I don't think has taken the time to understand it, and I had to educate myself. I organized after George Floyd's murder. I was like, how are our kids responding to this right now? So I organized Flowers High School, a bunch of students to just have a session to talk. Right, we did it virtually, and they started saying defund the police. You know what I mean? And I was like, well, what do you mean? Now, in that call, those students actually meant abolish the police. And I was just like, well, I was just like, what happens when, one parent beats up the other parent? You know what I mean? Like, one of the sad things about Prince George's County, which I'm also working to address, is, we lead the state in domestic violence related murders. You need someone to call. Now, does it need to be a militarized police force? No, not necessarily. But you need someone to help de-escalate a situation, but also sometimes come in with force. I can think of the last officer who was murdered in the county responded to a domestic related event. A man was beating his wife. The officer came. He knocked on the door. The doors opened, and the husband that was beating on the wife pulled up his shotgun and blew the officer away. There's in policy, there's no one size fits all. That's all I'm trying to say. Because people have to respond to real life. But I don't disparage folks who use the phrase defund the police at all. I see it as the nod.
Yeah, I feel you. And I guess, like you said, you don't use it. Is that because, do you see yourself as a leader, though, that maybe you using it in context and explaining it to certain people, do you think you have a role in that? Or do you think, you say you don't use it, right now, like what would it take for you to kind of like start to do that?
Well, what I've been doing is, like with my colleagues, I've been having more conversations with people over explaining and educating what defund the police means. So essentially what I say is, I don't say I endorse defund the police. I talk to people about what defund the police mean to folks who use the phrase to help expand the collective knowledge, right? That's a little wonky, but I do it so that those who hear the phrase and it's jarring to them will hear the message behind it that they need to receive without turning off,
Yeah, that's important for sure. I see that. looking at the clock. It's crazy. We're like nerds and we love the nuance of politics and all this because we talked about that for quite a minute now. I definitely wanted to get into some just life stuff too. I mean, I wanted to. First of all, we played in a band together. Do you still play the guitar at all?
I do. Matter of fact, hold on a quick second. I play whenever I get a chance. I don't get a whole lot now. I don't know if you're gonna play this online or if it's just gonna be audio, but I still jam when I get some time to do so. Not as much as I would like, but I love music, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm gonna ask you what song you're rocking to later as we close out the show. So I hope you have one in mind for that. But I'm glad you're still playing. I know when the baby comes around and all that. I know I stopped making beats right before my son was born, and I don't. I mean, that's just what it was. You know what I'm saying? That was just how I was just moving, and that was what it was. And eventually, I got back into it. So yeah, more power to you to keep up with the music. I know that's got to be therapeutic. As you're going through all the changes and struggles of what this year has been, and really it's just going to be something beautiful for life all the way through.
I mean, I'll tell you, I haven't had a chance to play since he was born 9 weeks ago. So.
That's okay. That's okay. These 9 weeks, these first few months are nuts. So I definitely no judgment. I might have taken a better part of a year off for real.
Really?
So, and I started a little bit before he was born, and after for a while. I might have dabbled a little bit, but when I get to making beats, it's like I might start something, I'll be like, that's garbage, and then I won't touch it. And it took me a while to get warmed up to the point where I was comfortable working on music for myself, which is crazy. But that's how my mind works anyway. But yeah, I keep it up when you're able to. But definitely the baby definitely takes priority for a while. And speaking of which, I mean, how has it been being a father? I mean, I know that has to have changed the perspective on what you do in terms of being a delegate. And actually, I mean, I meant to mention this at the top, but one of your Instagram feeds, you were talking about you had your son, and you were just talking about like how it was a real surreal moment. You were just like, man, like. This is I can't remember exactly what you said, but it hit me. You were just basically like this is a real pivotal time, and like it's not about us, it's about the kids. Like they are here, and they have no idea what they're in the middle of right now, and it's up to us to lead this current moment through to some sustainable, future for them. And I was just like, phew, that's extremely real. And I appreciated you putting that out there. And I feel you on that.
Yeah, it is it's been a treasure. It's been a treasure. Like I started at the beginning, this has been a tough year personally for me, and my son's like my little joy. That's my little soldier right there. His name's Miguel Antonio Lewis. I named him after my father.
Oh, nice.
And his middle name's after my wife's grandfather. So now I love that boy. And I think about the type of world he's going to inherit, which is based on the decisions we make today, And that's hitting me more, not just like personally with my family, like what am I doing for my family, but like, the environment. Like I remember the first time I was pulled over by the police when I was like 16 years old, and how I was treated. First time I was pulled over to police, I was maybe 2 minutes from my house. I was 16 years old.
It's always close to the home.
Yeah, man.
That first time, yeah.
And I was terrified. Just straight up terrified. And it was a black officer, and I think he could tell I was terrified, And he did all he could to try to be like, hey, I thought you were just going a little too fast, whatever. It's okay. You don't have to worry about anything. Like clearly, but like it is that, right? Like that's the world I inherited because of situations me and my friends had with police just walking around the neighborhood. So the first time I got pulled in a car, and I've heard so many stories and experiences I had. Now I've lost count how many times I've been pulled over by police. how many times police officers have yanked me out of the car, thrown me on the ground, put me in handcuffs, only to find out that the car I'm in is my car, things like that. And I don't want my son to experience none of that, you know? So
Right.
I don't want your son to experience none of that. And
Yeah.
I've just been having this idea that, you know, stuck in my mind that, you know, he's 9 weeks old. So I post pictures of him. And everyone's like, oh, he's so cute. Look at those cheeks, you know? And he's cute until he turns like 12, 13, you know?
Yep.
And then he starts to get a little height, and that voice starts to get a little deeper. Now all of a sudden, you know, folks may be a little scared of him because of both his blackness and his maleness intersecting in such a way that they were trained to think he's a threat, even though just 5 minutes ago he was this lovable kid. You know, that's, I think, particularly because I'm in the legislature, it makes me feel like we have to fix this now. Like we just, you know, we just have. I would not forgive myself if we did not push the same way like these conservatives are pushing to pack the court with these these folks,
Judges.
these, you know, I couldn't forgive myself. You know, so I think fatherhood has given me like new purpose. It's made me more of a worrywart than I already was, but it's also given me joy in this year that I was just kind of like, you know, just pushing through, you know, like trying to find time to grieve while helping others. And now, you know, I got to change diapers on 2-hour rotations, you know?
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
And I get to see his smiling face looking up at me. And for some reason, I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's one of those things too, like, and my son is 7, and so his name is Avery. And so for him, it's like, I mean, he's got some awareness of things. Like, he came from school talking about Ruby Bridges. So he's got some idea of like things aren't fair and stuff like that. And so the question I constantly have is, how much do I expose him to? How much do I share with him about the present moment? For example, like when Chadwick Boseman died, that was not something that we shared with him. And, you know, when George Floyd, all the protests were happening, you know, I just told him generally that people are protesting because we aren't being treated fairly and whatever. I didn't, you know, the details, how much should he know at 7? I'm sure some parents are telling their 7-year-olds more details, and that's fine. It's just a constant, I'm not gonna say it's a constant struggle. It's just a constant, almost a test of myself as an adult, and knowing that I want to shape this mind in a certain way. How do I best do that without triggering him or creating trauma, but also, you know, creating a very rooted and real sense of what things are actually like. So that way, I mean, people tell their kids, "Oh, you got to work twice as hard for half as much." I hated that. Like, I hated hearing that.
Yep.
And when I was in the work world with black people, everybody would always say that. And I was like, no, just bump that. You know, until I experienced it, I was like, well, I guess it's true. So it's like, you know, like, how much do we tell our kids that versus how much do we, you know, I don't know. That's a constant thing that I'm thinking about now that my son is at the age of 7. You got to get them diapers changed right now. But I know once 2, 3, 4 rolls around, you're going to have these same questions. And it's just like, you know.
No, I think about that. Like, how do I want to, you know, it's my job to guide him. I can't fully curate his life.
Yeah.
You know, but I do think about, you know, for one, it's not fair to have that burden, right? Why do one group of people have to, you know, burden their child with, instead of just being great, you know, they have to be twice as great to compensate for all the challenges they're going to face in life because of something they have nothing to do with, right?
Didn't cause anything, didn't ask for.
And you know, I think, you know, we can't fully stop it, right? It's you know, it's America's first sin in racism and discrimination, and it's like a tumor that just won't get cut out, you know. Through generations. But I but behind me, I have this Stankonia picture of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, but also a picture of John Lewis.
I was peeping that. I didn't see the Malcolm part until you moved your head, and I was like, "Yo, that is dope." I love that picture, man. That painting, man.
I've taken the pandemic to kind of turn my basement, which is also my workspace, into like a mini art gallery to just inspire me, by just a bunch of leaders who've done many things. Obviously, I got Rosa Parks over here with the nah.
I like that
in the background. But about 5 years ago, I organized this voting rights forum with Congressman Hoyer and Congressman John Lewis, and Lewis, John talked about coming from rural Alabama to becoming a member of Congress and leading SNCC and speaking on the March on Washington, at like 22 years old. He was the youngest person there. And how they got all this stuff done in the Voting Rights Act and, so many things. And then over his tenure in Congress. But he told me it is up to every generation to keep pushing the ball forward. It's not really up to us when we say fix it. It's not like, in our generation, we're going to single-handedly fix all the isms in America that all the generations before wasn't able to, right? Like, it's intractable. But by it, that means all of it that is possible for us to get done in our generation, we got to get that done, right? That just makes it so that Avery and Miguel, maybe they still have to work harder, but maybe not twice as hard as everyone,
Right.
Maybe just 25% harder, or 10% harder. I don't know, but I'm like, John told me to do it, so I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, and I think it's good to get that perspective from the elders, and the fact that you were able to meet him and work with him, before he passes is definitely amazing. I'm sure that'll stick with you. I mean, yeah, I don't know. That's such a it's such a galvanizing thing to an extent. I mean, my sister is 8 years younger than me, and she checks me all the damn time. It's like, and I appreciate that energy, but it's crazy how much a difference 8 years makes, much less, full decades makes. And I really think that it's a combination of, we're in our 30s, so that 30 something, our generation who has 10 plus years of experience post college or whatever, we've got some value in that experience. And then you've got folks that are just coming out of college now who they're like fed up with it. Like Gen Z is just like, nah, we're done. Like my sister's like, people my age don't even think America's going to exist by the time we have grandkids. And I'm like, damn. So it's like,
wow.
I mean, there's like, just in terms of some of the circles that she's exposed to, they're like, they have no confidence in the dollar, no confidence in nationhood or whatever. And it's just like, I mean, I don't know. It's just crazy to think about.
I wonder sometimes how much the algorithms from these social media platforms has to do with that. But that's a whole nother.
Maybe something to do with it.
That's a whole nother podcast. But that is very profound.
Yeah, no, it's so I don't know. There's a lot in there, but I think ultimately we shape. Oh man, you knew Ren McGrew, right?
Yeah,
at University of Maryland. Yeah. Yo, and he passed away, as you know, like back in June, and like
that hurt.
I remember one thing that he said that stuck with me, and for those who don't know, Ren McGrew worked at Nimburu Cultural Center, which was the home away from home for any black person at Maryland, or for most black people at Maryland. Any activist was in that joint all the time, talking to Solomon Kamajan and Dr. Ziegler and Ms. Carswell and everybody else. But Ren McGrew was always there, always working the back. He was always setting up, the AV equipment, making sure everybody sounded good, our band and stuff,
Yep.
But one thing he said at a Black Male Initiative meeting when I was there was, we are a product of our environments to a certain age, and then our environments are a product of us. And I was like, damn, that's it's validating of who you are, where you come from, but it's also empowering. And it's like, all right, you can't ride on that forever. At a certain point, you are curating the world you're in. And I mean, everybody takes different paths to doing that. And honestly, I don't think a lot of people take ownership of that idea. I mean, you as a delegate, you are doing that and representing other people in a very, very, very real and tangible, organized way. But even just having a family is doing that, you know, even choosing a partner and having a family, choosing where to live like that, you are creating your environment, even in that context, in a very familial context. So that's something that he said that has stuck with me ever since. And I don't know. I just appreciate you doing what you're doing. I mean, you seeing what you're doing gives me life. Just knowing that a fellow C Roots alum is out here at a state level making the moves that you're making. You know, I'm appreciative of it. I'm appreciative of it.
Thank you, brother.
You know, I'm a fan for sure. Keep doing what you're doing.
I appreciate it, brother.
And one of these days we got to get together and play some music, man. It's been forever. I need to learn. I need to get some guitar on these beats.
I am all about it. I was telling my wife that we have a group, Dems and Republicans, who would meet Monday nights during session and play basketball, which I really enjoyed. You know, we leave all the political stuff behind. No one even talks shop. Everyone, you just hear about people's family, people talking smack. You know, nice. It's just a good time to decompress and. Yeah, it's just, you know, it's sometimes I do miss those moments where you're just like, you know, that normal human connection where you're just like, you know what, let me just go jam with someone real quick, right? Or,
right.
You know, in politics, things are serious, but then you remember like, yo, people are still living their lives, you know? Yeah. Yes, some people are having hard times, but some people are having the best time of their life because they're just deciding to, you know?
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's important. Actually, funny story. I knocked on a door in, where were we? In Lake Arbor, in my district, during the campaign. And you know, a volunteer in the campaign knocked the door. I was on a different door talking to someone. And a young lady, you know, gave the homeowner one of my flyers. Like, hey, I'm here on behalf of Delegate Jazz Lewis. He's running for re-election. And he was like, with a name like Delegate, name like Jazz, he better know how to play music. I was like, I don't talk to volunteers. I only talk to the candidate. Tell him to come over here. So she comes over, she gets me, and he's like, you better play music with a name like Jazz. I was like, well, you know, I play lead guitar. I was like, but I don't have one here. You just have to take my word from it. You know what I mean? I didn't have a recording on me.
Yeah.
So he was like, you stay right there. He opens his garage. And he has you know, a drum kit there, a bass and a lead guitar, right? And the lead guitar was acoustic. So he was like, play. He was like, and if you're trash, you know, you're not gonna get my vote, and I'm gonna tell everyone on the block not to vote for you. You know? So I'm like, okay. So like, I'm standing in this guy's garage, just like jamming while he's staring at me.
He didn't even play anything? Did he play bass or drums?
No, he didn't.
Come
he just
on,
stood
man.
there like a Bama, you know? He just stared at me.
Dropped the beat?
You know, so I was just playing around with a couple chords and improv, you know, here and there. And after, she said, oh, you know, you all right. You all right. You know, I think I'll vote for you. Matter of fact, I'll send you a check, too, for your campaign. I was like, oh, I appreciate it. You know, that check never came. You know? But yeah, you know, I enjoy those type of moments, in the service. But I'd love to get together and jam. You know, actually, it'd be great if we can get everyone back together from the old band sometime, you know?
Yeah. No, yeah, I know Nick's still around. He's doing photography now. He's taking some bomb photos. I'm following him on Instagram now.
Nice.
He's doing big things. Kenny doing his thing.
Yep.
Yeah, man. A lot of people got families now. It's crazy seeing how everybody's grown up to an extent.
I know, man. I know. I was actually trying to look for my my chord book that I had a bunch of. This was like like 4 months ago. I was looking for my chord book that had the chords and the strum patterns for a bunch of our songs. And I just couldn't find it, because there were a couple chords.
Man, you got to find it at some point.
Yeah. Because I don't know if it was the time. It was some song we had that was like a strange chord I had that I was just like, I can't remember it now. But
it might be the time. The time has some cool chords on there. That's probably what it was. Yeah. That's cool, man. Well, I guess one final question, and then we'll get to wrapping it up. So, what are you looking forward to in 2021? I know we're coming up towards the end of 2020. Thank goodness for many. I know many are like, let's dead 2020. 2021, just maybe a personal thing and a professional thing you want to accomplish next year.
So, a personal thing, I want to travel. I want me and my wife and my son to travel after we get the vaccine, because we haven't gone anywhere. And my wife, she's from the Bronx, but her family's from Dominican Republic. So we probably don't go there next year, but I would love to travel with them at some point, just to get out of here somewhere near a beach. We didn't go near any beach this year, this summer, because my wife was pregnant. And we didn't want to risk, me getting sick or her getting sick. Professionally, I have a slew of bills I'm working on, from legalizing cannabis and ending prohibition, making sure we do auto expungement, all that type of stuff. Of course, I talked about the juvenile lifer bill that we're working on. I'm doing some small business stuff there. I'm just excited. I'm doing a lot of collaborations with my colleagues that I just feel like, whether it's because of the year we've had, whether it's because I've had my son who's just born, I just think the time is now, so I'm energized to get it done, and I think this session is going to be big. Professionally, too, I work on the Hill for Congressman Hoyer, so I'm going to try to see how we can, I can slide some of our racial wealth inequality, some of the policies to address that in his broader agenda that I think will really help the nation writ large. But I'm excited for 2021, actually, man. I'm imploring people to please go ahead and get the vaccine. I know there's a lot of people who are concerned about it, but people are only going to get going back to work once we do so. So I intend to take the vaccine for whatever it's worth to anyone's listening. I intend to get the Moderna one, the one that Fauci got, because I trust Fauci. So he got Moderna, I'm gonna get Moderna.
All right.
But I'm gonna take the vaccine.
All right, cool. That's what's up. Those are some good plans, man. I think travel's on a lot of people's lists right now, since a lot of that was cut short this year, or cut off this year. So to wrap up the show, I got a couple last questions for you that I ask guests, and usually I give a song that I'm rocking to right now, and I'm gonna give one too, because I just found a song that I absolutely bang with right now. But I'm gonna ask you first, what song are you rocking to right now?
Is it cool if I give 3 different capacities?
I'll allow it.
Okay, I appreciate you being generous. So my all-time favorite right now that I just listen on rotation is "Hustle and Motivate" by Nipsey Hussle. I listen to that all the time. It's just about staying focused and motivating others and motivating yourself. I listen to "Dear Theodosia" from the Hamilton soundtrack. Just because Jr. Yeah, it just makes me think about my boy and legacy and how and whatnot. And "Still Here." It's a Christian song by the Williams Brothers. I've been listening to a lot. It was one of my dad's favorite songs as well. It's just talking about how, like, through life, you get bruises and whatnot, but you're still here. You should take some faith in that alone, So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's dope. I appreciate those 3 songs. Those are definitely worthy of being shouted out. My song I'm rocking to right now, Big Crit dropped a Christmas song, and that joint bumps.
Oh, really? I haven't heard it yet. Let me check that joint out.
I'm banging with this, man. I'm telling you. And I feel bad because I already picked a Big Crit song for the song I'm rocking to earlier in the show. I think it was episode 2. I've heard some rap Christmas songs, and sometimes they're a little, sometimes they're a little playful, a little corny, sometimes whatever. Sometimes they're cool. This joint just dumps, and I got it on repeat. It's only 2 minutes long. I'm like, damn, Craig, can we get it to be a little longer? I need a third verse, man. This joint this joint rock.
It goes though.
So yeah, man. It
King
just
remembered in
elevates.
time.
Yeah, because Christmas songs can be down sometimes. This joint is just like, hey, I'm feeling this joint. So yeah, this one's good for me.
I'm glad you said Crit, because you know what? It probably was gonna be my fourth, and my fifth was probably gonna be like Big Crit Energy.
Yeah.
Because it gives me those feels. I'm gonna check out 'Tis the Season. I haven't heard it yet.
Yeah, definitely. That's a banger for sure. In my humble opinion. All right. So the questions I asked guests at the end, and you can only choose one for this one. So don't cheat and say three. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Super speed.
Super speed. Okay. Why?
I just think it's dope.
That's cool.
You can get anywhere you want. Folks can't really touch you. It just seems like a really, it'd be fun, right? Whereas other things may be powerful. It just seems like a fun superpower too.
That's cool. I've had a few guests on so far, and everybody until you has said flying, which is cool. I think a lot of people would like to fly. Now, is your super speed fast enough so that you can get lift underneath your arms if you spread them out? Like, can you get to flight if you go fast enough? Is that how it works? See, I'm an engineer.
Absolutely.
I got to think through all these different options.
Yeah, so super speed, not technically just my feet,
Hey, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so you can move your arms, I guess, swim real fast too, so to speak. But
okay.
Yeah, I just think run up a building. I don't know,
that would be dope. Yeah.
If you could run on water, I mean, just that, it'd be cool. I think if you want to be like, you know what, I feel like, going to San Diego's beach right now. You know what I mean? And you can get there. You can get there in 5 minutes and not be winded.
Hey, that's what's up. That's a good one. I like that. All right. Next question the last question really is, what's the last book you read and do you recommend it? And I know on Instagram you posted a picture of a number of books that you read this year. But yeah, what was the last book you read and do you recommend it?
The last book, I'm trying to think, because right now I'm reading, what was the last one I read? Right, I'm reading A Promised Land right now, which is Obama's book. The one before that was We Were 8 Years in Power, I believe, by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Yeah. Yep. So that was the last one I finished reading. And, yeah, I mean, so I've also, it's between the world and me, between the world and me. I think it's a little bit better than We Were 8 Years in Power, but that's only because We Were 8 Years in Power is a collection of 8 essays that he wrote for the Atlantic.
Okay, so it's not a cohesive book. Yeah.
Yeah, and he essentially does a little bit of commentary in between to try to weave them together, but and each one's from like a different year of Obama's presidency. To try to catalog, but it's not the same, it's not the same. But actually, sorry, no, that wasn't the last book I finished. The last book I finished was Kamala Harris's book.
Yeah, I just read that recently too. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that one. I think it's worth a read. She's going to be our vice president. You should know who she is. What she's about.
That's the approach I took. I read it because I was like, hey, she's going to be our VP, and personally, I read it and I was like, it's okay. I mean, it had some anecdotal, personal stories of her history, and it basically reiterated a platform.
Yeah, it's the I'm about to run for president book.
Yeah, that's what it was, and so I kind of took it like it was, and that was it. I mean, you mentioned Between the World and Me. I don't know that I've read it exactly once a year, but I know I've read it each of the last few years, but as Avery's getting older, I'm going to read it every year. It hits different as Avery gets older, and that's just going to be a book that I'm going to consume annually because it kind of like he wrote it as his son was reacting to, I think, was it Mike Brown? Oh, no. I think it was when Darren Wilson was let off, I believe, is what precipitated him writing that. It was a letter to his son. And that kind of addressed one of those topics we were talking about earlier about like raising our boys in this world. And that's what I'm gonna read every year because it just hits hard every time, and it hits a little different as the boy gets older. So
no, I think I've probably read Between the World and Me like either 2 or 3 times now. Fortunately, by the way, to anyone listening in, subscribe to your libraries. They have like audiobooks and the like, and like honestly, I have a physical copy of it, but I've technically never read the physical copy. Like I've read the book 3 times via audiobook, just because it was that impactful for me through drives, and it was all through I bought the book because I listened to an audiobook via the library system 3 times, and I was just like, I need to give this man some money directly, and then bought the book. Just like
I will second that. I do have the physical copy. I also have never physically read the physical copy. I have the audiobook on Audible, but I'm reading my 40th book this year, and the vast majority of them have been audio books, and the vast majority of them have been through the Prince George's County Public Library system. And so definitely register.
Great resource.
Get your library card. And I got one for Montgomery County, Prince George's, and DC. So you can see which jurisdiction has the books that you want. Sometimes you can get the audiobooks faster, certain different jurisdictions. But definitely utilize your local libraries. They got like Jazz, like you said, audiobooks are on there. I mean, I think I got Kamala Harris's book on there. I just read Haben, which is about Haben Germa, who went to Harvard. She's deafblind, black. She's her parents are from Eritrea. Anyway, like I don't know, everything's on there, and it's free, and it's just it's information. And during the pandemic right now, you can't. I know the library just restricted its curbside service now, so hopefully you already have your library card. Use the app to get the ebooks, audiobooks. Definitely plug for that for sure. All right. So yeah, we're gonna wrap it up. So where can people get in touch with you and follow your work? How should people reach out to you?
So you can reach out to me on Facebook, Delegate Jazz Lewis, Twitter, Jazz for Maryland, that's FOR, or on Instagram, Delegate Jazz Lewis as well. Or you can email me, jazz@jazzlewis.com. I will respond directly to you. Just be patient with me. Like I said, I got a 9-week-old, and in addition to being in the legislature, I have a full-time job outside of it. So I will get back to you. It may take me a little bit, but I respond to everybody. If you have ideas of legislation we should work on, please holler at me. I don't assume that just because we are elected, we have all the ideas, right? Too often the ideas that get pushed are from, folks who have organized interest groups, and those are the only ones that get talked about. But a lot of the ideas, particularly on breaking up the concentration of liquor stores and food desert issues, that's come from people in the community just talking to me. So if you have an idea that you just know, like, this would help a lot of people and no one's thought about it, reach out. Like, we could talk. I'd love to be a conduit to let your idea get some sunlight.
Hey, that's a great message. I appreciate you saying that. A lot of people probably feel like they don't have that voice, but you're a man of the people, and you're making that available to them. And I know your constituents appreciate that. So yeah, definitely. And if you don't live in Jazz's district, reach out to your own state delegate. Get tapped into your state politics and see what's going on in your state and your area. Because hopefully there's a representative that's as accessible as Jazz is, and if not, next go around, find one it is.
Or run.
Yeah, let's or run. Yeah, there you go. Better yet, run yourself. Exactly. Appreciate it. Yeah, Jazz, I really appreciate you spending the time to talk with me, both on the politics side and on the personal note. It's always good to get in touch with you and just, like I said, I'm a fan of what you're doing. You haven't changed. You've gotten older. You've gotten more mature and whatever. You got, a different family. You're married with a kid now, but you're still the same Jazz. You're still pushing for the same issues that we first met on college campus talking about. So I appreciate you sticking in the fight, in your role currently, and keep doing what you're doing, man. I'm here for it.
Thanks, Kyle. I appreciate it. Holla at you, man. Have a good one.
Appreciate everybody listening to this episode of Who Knows, It's Just Life, the podcast. As y'all know, you can find me on Instagram at RealDadult. That's RealDadult. I look forward to your feedback on this episode or any prior episodes, and also any ideas you might have on future episodes. You know, I hope y'all have a happy holiday season and a happy new year, and hope to see you in a positive 2021. Until then, be safe, be well, peace.